Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Shannen Ney. I'm the Southwest area agronomist. A little bit about me is I'm actually from Genesee. I worked for the grain department for P&W early high school years, and then I went to work for a local grower for a few years. And then when I went to college at the University of Idaho, I actually came back and interned for Kyle Renton in the seed and agronomy division. And then following college, I came on full time as a field man, working with the growers out of Uniontown and Colton up to Pullman and then west towards Yurtsville as well. I continue to help Kyle quite a bit with the research trials. This year I handled all of our foliar trials, and that's kind of what we're going to go through today. So we had 12 foliar trials. We had 10 that were on the research farm. They were seeded by our plot drill, managed by us. They were sprayed with either a four-wheeler sprayer or a CO2 backpack sprayer. And then we had a few on-farm foliar trials where we worked with local growers. They were seeded by the grower, they were sprayed by the grower, fully managed by the grower. And then at harvest time, we came out with a weigh wagon and were able to get some on-farm results for some of these products as well. Bryce was a big part of the foliar trials this year. He really headed up the canola. He helped me on some of the winter wheat trials. But a lot of work went into the trials. I kind of joked. I added up at the end of the season how many miles walking through trials with a backpack sprayer and a 5-foot wand. It equated to 24 miles of spraying trials. So a lot of work went into this. We really just hope that you guys benefit from some of this, that you guys find it as valuable as we do. Before we get into trial results, really just want to talk about how tough it was to make spray applications this spring. And you guys know this, you dealt with it a lot more than I did. But I put together this formula chart looking at an ideal spray day criteria. And this kind of includes wind to average less than 8 miles per hour, wind gusts less than 15 miles per hour, less than 30-degree temp swings, less than 5/100ths an inch of rain, and not freezing at night. So with this criteria, I put it into a formula looking from April 1st to June 30th, counting how many spray days we had under this criteria. In these 3 months, we only had 6 ideal spray days. And obviously, we didn't stick completely to this. Maybe there's a few hours here or a few hours there where we can go out and spray for a little bit. But it really just shows how tough it is on timing these applications and not damaging our wheat. You can see in the very bottom right, that picture, that's our winter wheat trial. This is on the west side of the research farm. I came out this spring making that herbicide timing application, applying the herbicide package. We had pretty good conditions. I made that application, and then a day later we had a hard freeze, and it resulted in a lot of tissue burn. Everybody knows Kyle, but Kyle walks through these trials every day, and I think it about ate him up having to look at how bad I burned his winter wheat. So this is kind of my excuse at just showing how tough it was to find ideal spray days. But all jokes aside, it really was just a tough spring for finding good timing. There was a lot of burnt wheat out there. Pretty tough timing these treatments. I did the same criteria for last year, the same dates, the same criteria, and it was 15 spray days. And last spring really wasn't even a good spring for spraying. So just shows how tough that is to make that application. We're going to jump into winter wheat results. We had 2 different winter wheat trials. This one was kind of our pride and joy. This was on the furthest east end of the research trial behind the ground piles. These flats were actually in alfalfa for about 5 years. We took them out last year and seeded this winter wheat trial. We looked at 18 of our most popular commercially available varieties, and we seeded each variety across 9 different ranges. And in each range, we looked at a different foliar package. So gained a lot of data from this. You can see in the very front of the trial, the front half of that first range, there was some lodging from varieties. The reason for this was that front half was actually summer fallowed, the back was alfalfa. And so got some pretty good lodging data. Shine was among the worst for lodging in this. Everybody knows straight shine has the tendency to go down under right conditions. Iliad actually showed pretty severe lodging. Bounty tipped over a little bit. Hefe actually showed a little bit of lodging, and then Sockeye also. I took 3 different days of stripe rust ratings for this trial. We did get some pretty severe stripe rust in this trial. What I'm using here is what I called the late season stripe rust ratings. This was from the end of June. Really, I think it was a good rating just because it shows what varieties were still dealing with active rust, what varieties had recovered at that point, and what new infections were coming. And so it kind of covered the board there. We really like using Magic in these trials just because it's the most susceptible variety we have in the market. I think everybody knows we could spray it a half a dozen times and still have stripe rust, and so that's kind of our check. May 5th, we were able to find pre-pustules forming, just starting to come on, but it was really Memorial Day weekend that active rust really came onto the trial. That's when Magic blew up, a few other varieties came on. But out of 18 varieties in the first range, which was the untreated check, there was 8 varieties that showed active stripe rust. And I rated this from a 1 to 5. Excuse me. I rated this from a 1 to 5. The 1 is most severe. This is really like the Magics. Bounty actually was rated a 2. It was pretty severe. This is really the most severe stripe rust infection. And then a 5 was just where you can find those pustules. Really not very much active stripe rust, but just starting to occur. So after 1 fungicide application, there was still 4 varieties with active stripe rust. But after 2 fungicide applications, it was just Magic and Bounty. And Magic still showed pretty severe stripe rust after 2 fungicide applications. Bounty, you could find some stripe rust, but it really wasn't actively spreading. There's probably an amount of damage there, but it was very minor of how much stripe rust after 2 fungicide applications. The varieties that really didn't break at all, that showed the best disease resistance, is Empire, Kamiak, Shine, Exceed, Triton, and Cameo. These varieties never broke to rust, even without a fungicide application. Really, really good disease packages. We're going to jump into the trial data. There's a lot of numbers here. I'm going to kind of try to keep it simple. We're going to first just look at the variety performance across the entire trial, and then we'll look at the foliar packages in the next slide. So really the number you want to look at is this variety average. And I'm going to downsize the profile here so I'm not picking up the screen. But this is really the number you want to look at. This is the performance of a variety across the entire trial. We talked about the Magic and its severe stripe rust damage, but you can really just see that the check over here versus the mycrop the check over here versus the mycrop, which is what we use for the fungicide, it averaged 52%. The check averaged 52% of the 2 fungicide applications. So it really just shows that damage that stripe rust did. But across the trial, this was one of the lowest performing, averaged 143 bushels. This site was, like I said, an alfalfa for 5 years. It's a sub-irrigated flat, really good soil, so it was a high-yielding trial, but really just shows that damage. The yield winners was Kamiak and Shine. These are 2 of our earliest, shortest varieties, and that was kind of the theme this year, that the shorter, earlier varieties performed better than the later, taller varieties. I just think the shorter, earlier varieties, they didn't focus as much on growing straw, but they were able to get into that pushing ahead and filling ahead really early and beat the heat. Whereas those later varieties, they were focused so much on growing all that vegetation and all that straw. And then when they start pushing ahead and trying to fill ahead, that's when that heat was there. And I think that's really what killed those later varieties. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but we saw this theme through the trials. We saw it commercially, but right here it's shown pretty clear. We try to keep these trials as consistent as possible, really trying to remove any variables that we can control. The only thing I can think, you could see a lot of red in the bottom of this trial. This was the south end of the trial, closest to the creek. The only thing I can think with this is on June 13th, we had a really hard frost. We had 29 degrees overnight. A lot of wheat was dinged, even commercially, but on this flat, I just wonder if with this side of the trial being a little bit lower in elevation, maybe it was a little bit more susceptible to that frost damage. I'm really not sure what that is. It's disappointing, but we do our best to try to eliminate these factors. But this was just one thing that we didn't do a very good job at. So now we're going to jump into the packages. Really, the number we want to look at is the net dollars per acre. Yield is important, but if yield doesn't correlate to dollars per acre, then really what are we gaining? There's a lot of products available to the grower. And so our goal is just to show what products result in an increase in dollars per acre. We could push bushels all day long, but really in a year like this year, we want to be pretty careful about what we're applying, trying to keep input costs down and really only apply products that we can look for an increase in ROI. And so that's the number we're going to look for throughout this entire presentation. I put a cost analysis on every trial. Again, just putting an emphasis on how important that increase in dollars per acre is. That's really what we're going to focus on. And so there's products that even show a little bit of a yield increase, but then show a decrease when we apply the cost of the treatment. And so that's kind of some of the things we're going to try to be aware of. Under treatment cost here, this cost back under the PGRs, Rally, all of these treatments, this actually includes 2 applications of fungicide. We really wanted to eliminate any stripe rust from the equation and put some pressure on these products. And so all of the nutritional, the PGRs, the foliar fertilizer, all of these treatments did receive fungicide at herbicide and flag leaf timing. And then this treatment, the mycrop at herbicide timing, that 300 range, this will be our check for all of those treatments. So the first 3 ranges, these were our fungicides and fungicide timings. The first range was an untreated check, and then we had a fungicide at herbicide timing and a fungicide at both herbicide and flag leaf timing. We used mycrop for these treatments. This is a micronized desoxystrobin and propiconazole. We've always seen really good responses from this, and for the cost of the product, this is usually what we use as our fungicide checks. From the untreated check to the 1 fungicide application at herbicide timing, we saw a 12% yield increase across the entire range, and we increased our net dollars per acre by almost $90. So saw a really nice yield increase with every variety in the trial with that application. But when we made that additional application at flag leaf timing, we saw a very small, just a slight yield increase, but we actually didn't see much of a response in dollars per acre. I just think this is really where we got to know our varieties. I think a variety like Magic or Bounty, even Hefe, where it picked up a little bit of stripe rust, these varieties that are a little bit more susceptible to rust, this is probably where that flag leaf application would pay for itself. But across the entire range, I think most varieties in here had pretty good disease resistance. And so across the entire range, we actually didn't see much of a response with that additional fungicide at flag leaf timing. Palisade, which is a plant growth regulator, won the trial for yield and for dollars per acre. This is kind of an interesting response. I think usually we'd see maybe a yield drag with a PGR application on winter wheat. This year, I just think it continues to prove our theme. And I think with that plant growth regulator, I think it just forced some of those later varieties to switch gears and not grow so much vegetation, but switch gears and start focusing on pushing ahead and filling ahead. And I think that's where this yield increase came from, was really forcing those later, taller varieties to switch gears. We saw a really nice yield increase across every variety with the plant growth regulator. Across the entire range, there was an average height decrease of about 3 inches per variety. Some varieties didn't show any height decrease. Other varieties showed 4 or 5 inches of height decrease. It really just depended on the variety. One thing I found really interesting, and I'm not sure if this was a correlation between the two or just coincidence, but the varieties that showed the largest height decrease with the PGR actually showed the largest yield increases with that application as well. And so like Iliad showed the largest height decrease. I think it was 4.5 inches shorter than the check, and it showed the largest yield increase, picking up, I think it was 35 bushels. And so we saw that across all the varieties, is those varieties that showed that biggest height decrease also showed the largest yield increase. And so that's something that's kind of interesting as well. On a year like this year where it was really hot and dry, it was tough to know if a foliar fertilizer application was worth it, if it improved ROI or improved dollars per acre. This year, looking at Rally did really good. It probably would have been worth it. This was the second best yield and best dollars per acre. We saw a really nice yield increase with most varieties with Rally, and saw a nice increase in our dollars per acre as well. So that treatment was probably worth it. This year, we looked at different adjuvants. We looked at pairing a fungicide with different adjuvants just to see if there's a correlation in how much of that fungicide product was actually available to the plant or made it to the plant. This is something we've never really done before. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide, but we looked at Interlock, which is a wind-filled adjuvant. This contains a drift agent, a canopy penetrant. It's a really good adjuvant. And so we used this, and then our check is going to be our 2 applications of mycrop with just a standard NIS. I think it's important, obviously, what fungicide or what herbicide we apply, but I think it's also important how we get that product to the plant, and that's where adjuvants come in. That's really what we wanted to look at, was to see if there was a difference between adjuvants and how well it gets that product to the plant. I think no matter what, there's product that's lost in the foliar application process, whether it be from wind drift or droplet size, whatever that might be, there is product that's lost. And so on a year like this year, especially where commodity prices are lower, we really want to be careful about what we're applying, but we also want to be careful and pay attention to how we get that product to the plant and how we can improve that efficiency in that application as well. Again, our check is the MyCrop herbicide and flag leaf application with a standard NIS, and then we looked at interlock in comparison, which is the Winfield adjuvant. Across the entire range, we saw 6 bushel per acre increase, which increased our dollars per acre by $33. But what I really think is interesting is like looking at Magic, which is a very, very susceptible variety. With the interlock as the adjuvant versus the MyCrop with the standard adjuvant, we saw a 19% yield increase using interlock, which was 35 bushels to the acre. So we saw a really nice yield increase. I think this just shows that more of that fungicide made it to the plant. More of that fungicide was taken up by the plant and really helped with that stripe rust. So we're going to continue to look at this. We looked at interlock on all of our different crops as well, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later. This is our second foliar winter wheat trial. This was a little bit different. This was just one variety, and we looked at a lot of different products. There's a lot of different products available to the grower, and we really want to just put a lot of them on pressure, trying to figure out which ones showed increases in dollars per acre and not just yield. This trial was just over the creek from our research ground, just south of the research farm in Jeff and Jason Boyd's farm. You can see in the picture below, the first range, there was actually some shine left in Jason's drill. And so the first range and half of the second range is shine. And then the remaining half of the trial is bounty. This really didn't mess up anything for us because our treatments are randomized throughout all 3 ranges. And so being consistent, the variety's been consistent across the whole range. It really didn't change anything for us. We've had trials in this site before. It's always been really consistent. I think we saw the same thing this year. This trial was broken out into 2 halves. What we're looking at right now is the fungicide side of the trial. And then on the next slide is the nutritionals. We actually looked at an insecticide, biological, that side of the trial on the next slide. As far as fungicides go, there was really only one fungicide that performed better than the untreated check, and that was 4 ounces of tilt. We picked up about a bushel, and with this treatment being so cheap, only $3 or $4 an acre, we saw a $5 gain per acre. It's interesting because every other fungicide commercially available, we actually saw a decrease in dollars per acre. I just think with the conditions this year, I just think that maybe shut off too early, but we really didn't see any response from any of the other fungicides. You can see down below, we tested quite a few experimentals. These are from Alba. Because they're experimentals, I didn't have a cost analysis on it, but you can see just from raw yield, a lot of those experimentals performed better than the untreated check, like significantly. That Alba 12 picked up 13 bushels to the acre. So it's kind of encouraging and exciting to see that there is some products coming down the line that are showing promising results. This was really what we captured in this trial. This was what was exciting. We really never looked at insecticides on winter wheat before. I think the last time was in 2021. It was a year similar to this year where we had a lot of aphid pressure, and we're trying to figure out if we should make that application, applying an insecticide to winter wheat or not. That year we went out, Kyle actually went out and he had a winter wheat seed treat trial. And so he sprayed the 100 and the 300 range with Warrior. And at harvest time, we gained 25 bushels to the acre across those 2 ranges. So saw a really nice yield increase. This year, we saw pretty similar results. We used Bifentra as our insecticide. With 1 application at herbicide timing, we picked up 13.5 bushels an acre, which was $71 increase on dollars per acre. And then when we came in at flag leaf timing and made that additional application, we picked up 18 bushels an acre, which increased our dollars per acre by $91. So really good response. We could just see how much damage those aphid cause. I think I was the first one to maybe discourage that treatment this year. I didn't spray any of our winter wheat trials with a full trial insecticide. When growers called me, I really kind of discouraged it. I just thought we were late enough in the season that those aphid couldn't do enough damage. But really just, yeah, I think I was completely wrong. And I think moving forward, if we have another year like this year where we have concerns of aphid, I just think it pays for itself. If you're going out there anyways, just throw in an insecticide, $2 or $3. You could really just see the damage those things do. Jumping into spring grains, we had two spring grain trials. We had one that's kind of our traditional variety trial where we look at our most popular commercially available varieties, really looking at their disease package and looking at how one fungicide application or two fungicide application and how the plant responds. The second trial was similar to what we just looked at. It was just one variety seeded across the whole trial, and then we looked at a lot of different foliar products that are available and a few timings and rates there as well. Our spring grain trials really were not very exciting this year. Looking at our rainfall report, we seeded these trials both around the 15th of April. From April 15th to the end of June, the site only received 1.6 inches of rain. And then on top of that, the average high temperature for June was 75 degrees. And so obviously a wheat plant can handle these conditions. But then when July came on, the site only received 0.2 inches of rain more, and the average high temperature for July was 91 degrees. So this site really just burned up. I think we saw commercially too. A lot of spring wheat just burned up. I think yield was maybe established or already maxed out by, I don't know, end of June, even early July. I think yield was already established at that point. And so the results we see, I think, is really just because of the hot and dry conditions. This is the results from our variety trial. Again, just looking at our most popular commercially available varieties. You could tell pretty quick, most of these varieties performed best on the untreated check. And so, again, we put a cost analysis to this. There are a few varieties like Bush and Tico that actually picked up a few bushels with that herbicide timing application. But then when we came back and factored in the cost, we actually showed a decrease or a loss in return on investment, and untreated checks still performed best on a cost analysis view there. Again, just looking at the gross dollars per acre, you can see almost all the varieties in the trial. The best dollars per acre came from the untreated check. I just, again, think this is from the weather conditions. I think spring wheat burned up quick, didn't have enough moisture. The temperatures got too hot too quick. And, this fungicide, we've seen fungicides in the past too. We've seen fungicides help with drought stress tolerance. This year, I just think the conditions, wheat plant's pretty tough, but with the conditions being so hot and so dry, I just don't think it really helped. I think they were just too shut off and too late. Butch was the only variety that showed a yield increase and increase in dollars per acre with that herbicide application. But then when we made that additional flag leaf timing application, we saw a decrease in yield and dollars per acre. Over here on the right, this is looking at just the treatment mean. This arrow, that's the untreated check, and then orange is the fungicide at herbicide timing, and then herbicide and flag leaf timing. You could just see that the best yield across the entire trial came from the untreated check. We had enough data to put together a 3-year average for a few of these varieties. Ryan and Tico are our most popular spring wheat varieties. It just seems like on hotter and drier years, Ryan can perform a little bit better, being a little bit earlier of a variety, can beat the heat a little bit better than Tico. Whereas Tico being a little bit later, it seems like on cooler and wetter years, Tico maybe has the yield advantage. Across 3 years, Tico did have a little bit of a yield advantage over Ryan. Really what we want to look at though is across 3 years, that herbicide timing application was a little bit more beneficial than the later application. It kind of flip-flopped between years, but on average, that herbicide timing application across all 3 varieties proved to be a little bit more, little bit better yield increase and better dollars per acre increase. I didn't really want to include this part on the bottom. This is just looking at the average income or average impact per acre across each year, including all these 3 varieties. You can see 2022 commodity prices were up. We had really good spring wheat yields. Saw a really nice revenue per acre there. 2023, the price of wheat was down, but we did cut pretty good spring wheat bushels. And then 2024, unfortunately, the price of wheat's down and we didn't cut good yields. And so pretty disappointing to see the impact there. This is our product trial in spring wheat. The site was just seeded to Ryan, and then we looked at a lot of different commercially available products. Again, interlock with the microp herbicide and flagleaf timing was the only treatment that showed better dollars per acre than the untreated check. We saw about a 3 bushel increase and increased our dollars per acre by about $4. Nextcore is usually one of the most profitable and the best returns on fungicides you could use on spring wheat. This year we saw about a 5 bushel increase, which was the best yield increase in the trial. But when we factored in the treatment cost, it actually resulted in a negative return on investment, and we actually saw a little bit lower of a dollars per acre than the untreated check. Looking below, looking at a few of the nutritional products, this is factoring in the 2 applications of fungicides. All the nutritional and biological treatments got those 2 applications of fungicides, really just trying to eliminate any potential stripe rust. The site didn't get rusty at all, so it really wasn't a concern. But there was a few nutritional products that performed well. Copper performed well. Maxin Z&B, that's zinc, manganese, and boron. We saw about a $10 gain per acre there. Rally, 5 gallons of Rally, we actually saw about a 3 bushel increase there. That showed pretty good results as well. Looking at interlock again, this is interlock compared to the check, which is 8 ounces and 10 ounces of microp with just a standard NIS. But similar to the winter wheat results, we picked up 5.6 bushels versus the check and increased our dollars per acre by about $38 per acre. So saw a really nice yield increase there. We actually saw a nice bump in test weight as well. I just think this shows a little bit more of that product making it to the plant, whether it be from drift or just better uptake from the plant, but saw a really nice response there. Getting into canola, we seeded two foliar canola sites this year. We seeded one in the Genesee Research Trial, and then again in Albion, we seeded a trial on Clark's Farms. We've done this trial for about 5 years. Unfortunately for Genesee, we had some crusting issues. We went throughout the whole season with still making those protocols. I made all the applications and sprayed it. But then at harvest time, we had concerns. And then when we got the results, there was just a lot of inconsistencies with the results we got, a lot of variability between results. And so we ended up deciding not to publish that data. Albion was a really good site, though. Bryce really took care of this trial. He did most of the work here. But this was a very consistent site, and we got a lot of good data from this. We seeded the Albion trial on April 18th. This was seeded to 9221. We use our 9 plants per square foot like we do in commercial fields. At the first Roundup application, I included bifenthrin in that application just for the flea leaf beetle. This was at the 3 to 4 leaf stage. And then at herbicide timing, Bryce came in and made that herbicide timing application at the 5 to 6 leaf stage. Then a few weeks later at mid-bloom on June 21st, I came in and I made the bloom timing application for this trial. Jumping into the results, the best yield response came from a package. This was Everlon, Interlock, and Vine and Veg. For those that don't know, Everlon is just Preaxer. Preaxer recently came off patent, and Winfield picked up a private label. This is not a generic. BASF is making this product for Winfield. It's just under a private label. And so the private label name is Everlon, but it's again, really just Preaxer. But these were the best 2 yield responses. At bloom, this package showed about a 280 pound an acre increase, picking up about $26 per acre. So a really nice response there. Herbicide timing was a little bit lower, but still showed about a 230 pound increase in dollars per acre by about $17. So a really good response there. Azoxystar, this won the trial in both sites last year. This is a group 11, a strobe fungicide. For the cost of this product, it's a really cheap application cost, $4 or $5, but we picked up 200 pounds versus the check. This has always been a really good investment. I think traditionally we've seen canola respond a little bit better to strobe fungicides rather than like a group 7. But because of the treatment cost, it looks really good with a cost analysis. Picked up about $31 per acre with the Azoxystar. Vine and veg, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but this has probably been the most consistent product we've tested on canola. We've tested it for about 5 years. This is a Winfield product. It's a micro package. It has nitrogen, has some calcium, boron, manganese, zinc. Usually it does even a little bit better than this in the trials. I have it in a strip trial we're going to look at in a little bit, but it still showed really good response. We picked up about 136 pounds per acre, increased our dollars per acre by almost $17. So a really good response there. And when I talk about consistency of a product, this is really what we give valor to. Really, the consistency of how a product performs over multiple years and multiple sites. You know, good years, bad years, different soils. Really, to see how a product performs under all conditions and multiple years. And so, this is a 5-site, 3-year average for a lot of these products. You can see on the bottom half, there's a few products we didn't have full 3 years of data for. Azoxystar is one of those. This is probably going to be among the top next year when we have a full 3 years of data. But just looking at the products that we have a full 3 year of data for, this is what I can talk about when I talk about consistency. Vine and veg across all these sites in the 3 years, we've averaged 330-pound yield increase over the check, which increases our dollar per acre by $51. And so this is a pretty cheap application cost. It's about a $7.5 application cost. But shows a really good return on investment, picking up $51 per acre. Everyone has shown really good responses as well. Again, this is just pre-Axer, but across all these sites and years, we picked up about 295, just shy of 300 pounds per acre, and showed about a $37 increase. Mycrop with micros, again, this is just the mycrop, the micronized azoxystrobin and propiconazole, but then with a micro package. And this is a pretty cheap application cost as well. We've tested this for quite a few years. It wasn't labeled, and so that's why we really weren't moving forward with it. But this last year, it did get labeled for canola. And so if you're looking for a micro and a fungicide package, this is probably a pretty good package. We've seen a nice yield increase, just shy of 300 pounds per acre, and a pretty cheap application cost as well. Miravis Neo, this is probably one of the most popular foliar fungicides to use on canola. I just think for the product cost, we just really haven't seen the responses. I think, you know, a $20 Miravis Neo versus a $5-6 Strobi or cheap Strobi or cheap fungicide. I think I'd go the Strobi fungicide the whole way. Just a little bit cheaper of an application cost and seeing better responses. This is the strip trial. I worked with John Semmington Farms just south of Pullman. They had a field of 9221 seeded. This was farmer managed. They went out and they sprayed at the second Roundup application. They sprayed half the field with Approach, and the other half they sprayed with 32 ounces of Vine and Veg. Pretty straightforward. You could see there was a really nice yield increase with the Vine and Veg over the Approach. We picked up about 210 pounds per acre and increased our dollars per acre by $44 an acre. Like I said, we've tested this product for a lot of years. I think what makes the Vine and Veg so unique, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depthly later, but the Vine and Veg product is fully amino acid based, so it's in an organic form. It's more readily available to the plant. You know, the plant's able to uptake this more easily and not spend time converting it to an available form. I think especially at bloom timing, you know, when that plant's putting all that energy into filling pods, I think it's really essential to get it to the plant as quick as possible. And I think that's where those amino acid products really shine, is being readily available to the plant right when you apply it. And so that's something we'll talk about a little bit more later. Jumping into the chickpea trials, we had 2 trials this year. We really like having multiple sites where we could replicate these same treatments. This year we seeded a trial in our research trial. This was seeded to WSU Quinns, and then actually east of the research trial, Doug and Trevor Stout had a field of Quinns seeded just a few days later than we did. We were able to go out into the field, find a consistent spot, and then we flagged off 5-foot reps, and then we sprayed out alleyways, and we made the same treatments to both sites. And so 2 sites of data. That's really what we like to do is being able to spread that out and get multiple sites. We use WSU Quinns. It's a little bit more susceptible of a variety. So for fungicides, we hope to try to get that early infection with Ascochyta put some pressure on these fungicides we're testing. We really didn't get any ascochyta in these trials at all. I don't think in commercial fields I saw any ascochyta at all either. With it being so hot and dry and really not having much disease pressure in the last few years, it hasn't been as much of a concern. But we did see some differences in products and treatments and stuff. I made the herbicide timing application on June 6th. Both sites were about a day apart in treatments, but both were about 11th to 12th node. And then at bloom timing, which was June 25th, around 18th, 19th node, I made that additional bloom timing application. Jumping into just the fungicide portion of the trial, again, this is split up. We're going to look at fungicides and then we'll look at the nutritional products in a second. As far as fungicides go, ProPol showed a really nice yield response, showed a nice return on investment. We picked up about $25 per acre, and across both sites saw about 170-pound increase over the check. So a really nice response there. Everlon showed the best return on investment. Again, this is just pre-Axer, but this is traditionally what a lot of growers would have applied. Miravis Top took a lot of those acres now. Kind of what we've established though throughout doing these trials the last handful of years is on years where we have severe ascochyta or really any ascochyta pressure, we want to look towards those group 7s, which is pre-Axer, it's got that exemium in it, and then Miravis Top. And so those are the AIs that really do a good job on controlling that ascochyta blight. But then on years like this year where it's a little bit hotter and drier, you could maybe look to those cheaper fungicides where you just get that plant health aspect. That's something we're still getting out of the group 3s and the group 11s, the strobies, where you can get that plant health aspect. And that's really what we're looking at with ProPulse is the plant health aspect. I think what I like about the pre-Axer is it's got a little bit of both. It's got the group 11, the Strobe, and then also the group 7. And so we're seeing a plant health aspect, but also have that active AI or that AI that's active on ascochyta pressure and still showing good responses. And so Everlon showed a good return this year. The 2 application of Everlon's a little bit less. I think, traditionally what we've seen on fungicides, on chickpeas, is that herbicide timing application, that early application, is really the best return. That's really the most essential. And then just knowing your crop, knowing the year. If you have active ascochyta out there, that's when you got to make that bloom timing. But the best responses we've seen over the last few years come from that early application. Like I said, Miravis Top, it's usually the top of the trial if we have active ascochyta pressure. This year, especially factoring in cost, it's more expensive of a treatment than most of the products in here. And so if we're not seeing as big of a yield increase for the Miravis Top herbicide, we only saw a 90-pound increase. And then factoring in that treatment cost, it kind of lagged. I do think Miravis Top is probably my go-to if we have ascochyta blight. But on years like this year, again, hotter and drier, I think we could save a few dollars and go for something a little bit cheaper. Again, experimental is pretty exciting to see some experimentals doing well. I didn't have a cost analysis on it, but Albal 1, if you just look at raw yield, it performed really, really well. It topped the trial for yield, showed the best pounds versus check, the best increase in yield at 207 pounds an acre. So really excited. There is some products coming. And so we'll be looking for those in the next few years. So as we switch to look at the nutritional products, like I said, for fungicides, there's a few things we established with ascochyta blight. Look for the group 7s. If we have no ascochyta blight, look to the strobies, the cheaper fungicides. But as far as nutritionals, there is some differences. And the biggest differences we're seeing, with the fungicides, we see the best responses at that herbicide timing treatment. Well, with the nutritionals, we're actually seeing the best response come from bloom. And a lot of this is when the plant is most responsive to these micronutrients. And so when the plants, as a guard plant's in that vegetative stage, there's a few micros it's most responsive to, and that's like iron, manganese, and moly, right? Well, as that plant switches from a vegetative to a reproductive stage, there's a bunch of micros, and these are just the most essential micros. But these are the micros that the plant is most responsive to. And that really is to help support that reproductive stage, support that flowering, that pod formation, and the pollination and the seed development. That's really where we're going to maybe see some differences in A and B size beans, support that maturity. And so there's a few of these micros that the plant is most responsive to at that reproductive stage. And that's boron, copper, iron, manganese, moly, and zinc. And so that's really what we try to look for when we're choosing which products to test at that bloom timing micro application. And that's kind of what we saw in the trial this year. We tested a product called Maxin for beans. This is a Winfield product. I'm going to talk about this on the next slide a little bit. But this product, again, it's a Maxin product, so it's fully amino acid based. And that's really, I think, why we're seeing these responses. It's more readily available to the plant. It's quicker available, quicker to the plant. The plant's able to uptake it quicker. And just a lot more efficient of an application being in that fully organic form. And so this Maxin for beans, it's a micro package. Again, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depthly on the next slide, but in both trials, this topped the trials, both at herbicide and bloom timing. Bloom showed a little bit better responses. Again, like we talked about, picking up 200 pounds per acre, showing a really nice return on investment. We saw an 8-to-1 return on investment, spend $1, get $8 back. From a grower's perspective, it seems like if you have a 4-to-1 return on investment where you spend $1, get $4 back, that's really what we look for. And so anything above that, I count as a win. And so a 1-to-8 return is really, really, really good return. This product was a little bit less of a response at herbicide timing, but still showed about a $55 increase per acre. Again, there's that Voyagrow. Voyagrow is a biostimulant from Winfield. This is a biostimulant that really helps with drought stress. This is a product that's kind of bounced back and forth on results throughout the years. A year like this year, where it was hotter and drier, it was really among the top for most of our trials. It did really good on canola also. This is a pretty cheap application, but like I said, on cooler, wetter years, we really don't see the responses we saw this year. Molly B Mag, this is a product that won the trial last year, showed really good responses. This is actually the best return on investment in the trial. Spend $1, get almost $12 back. So really good response there. Like I said, this won the trial last year. And so this is pretty cheap application cost and a really good return on investment. We did a bean size this year, factoring in yield and also bean size and putting that to gross dollars per acre. Factoring in these two aspects, the best gross dollars per acre came from the Maxin for beans, a really nice yield increase, picking up $81 per acre with that treatment. This is just looking at the Maxin products. You've heard me say Winfield and Maxin and amino acids a bunch today, but I really think these are pretty special. This year we looked at a lot of their Maxin lines. We tested Maxin vine and veg for a lot of years, I think 4 or 5 years, and always seen really good responses. And so we started looking more into their Winfield's Maxin line of products this year, knowing that they're fully amino acid based, and knowing that the benefits to the plant that brings. And so we're excited to see the same responses with Maxin for beans. Saw really good responses. This is a foliar package of nitrogen, boron, iron, manganese, moly, and zinc. And so really, really good product for the chickpeas. Another aspect of the Maxin products is the corn sorb technology. This is a patented technology for Winfield, but it really just acts as a sugar source. And so the corn sorb in these Maxin products, it increases nutrient uptake through the cell structures. Really just, like I said, acts as a sugar source and increases that nutrient uptake. Increases movement through the leaf cuticle. And so I think that plays a big part of that too, is getting more of that product into the plant, increasing that uptake. Like I said, we've looked at looked at vine and veg for a lot of years. We've always seen really good responses. One thing about it is it really wasn't available to the grower. Nobody locally carried it. And so this year, working with Winfield, we actually were able to get a few pallets in and get a few pallets of that vine and veg out to growers to use. That's where we did like our strip trial, weigh wagon stuff. But being able to get it out to growers, we see such good responses, but if it's not available to the grower, really we don't gain much. And so being able to carry a little bit of that this year was exciting. We're going to actually move forward a little bit. We're actually this year going to carry Maxin for beans and vine and veg for canola. And with the support of Sean and the board of directors, we're pretty excited to go forward with this. Really just seeing the responses we're seeing in the trials. We want to get some of this out to the growers and hopefully see similar results and on-farm responses as well. Thank you guys for listening. Again, my name's Shannen Ney. My contact information's here. If you have any questions or want to go over any of this, I'd really like to visit. So thank you for watching.